He is a Penn State insider. Also, just for good measure, the lead announcer of TNA Wrestling, Mr. Tom Hannifan. Tom, you there, my friend?
Yes, sir. How you doing, Adam?
Dude, life is good. Stay the heck away from our football coach. And how are you?
I feel like this is a call between spies from opposite countries, and it's calling to be like, what do you know? What do you know? I don't know. What do you know? I thought I knew this, and we're attempting to share information. I can tell you this, buddy.
Yeah.
It's a polarizing subject amongst Penn State football fans, whether Matt Rhule is actually won it or not. So you might be safe in the grand scheme of things.
Okay, so dive into that a little bit, because how do Penn State fans view this? And maybe, you know, whether it be the brass up top, sometimes they view things differently than the fans, than the former players. Who knows how much say the former players have, but obviously the AD there at Penn State hired Matt Rhule at Temple. They have a working relationship. But how do the folks from Penn State's side view Matt Rhule?
It's hot and cold. So you touched on the element of his relationship with Pat Kraft. Obviously, Matt Rhule attended Penn State, talked about it earlier on this week. He met his wife there, loves the university. I think his connection to the Paterno era resonates with a lot of the older members of this community, of the Penn State fan base, the administration, et cetera. Not that it's a desire to get back to the old days of some kind, but that had been a element of Penn State's history that had been almost completely ignored under James Franklin. And you could understand it in the wake of the Sandusky scandal, but it's an element that really bothers Penn State fans, that James Franklin and most of his time there just ignored the fact that Joe Paterno ever really existed. So having that connection to the past and connecting with those lettermen has been something that the Franklin era really dropped the ball on. So having that new connection, I think, would be important to a lot of people. And yes, the flat out fact that he is a Penn State guy, has coached in the state of Pennsylvania in the past. The cold when it comes to Matt Rhule is that he is 0 against the top 10, and he is 2-23 against top 25 teams, which has many people saying this is a worse version of what we just got done with dealing with for 12 years. And that's no disrespect to what Matt Rhule has done throughout his career, but the numbers are the numbers. And I think that was the issue as well with James Franklin. Nobody thinks Matt Rhule is a bad coach or a bad man. No one thinks James Franklin is a bad coach or a bad man. But when your goal is to go from roughly 9 or 10 wins a year to a national championship, there's a desire for this next head coach at Penn State to be someone who has proven or looks as if they will be able to get Penn State over the hump. And so far, Matt Rhule's record is that, yes, he builds programs, but he doesn't build champions.
So let me ask you a follow-up question, because one of the things that I pointed out, you know, is he's a little bit over 500 as a coach, but he's never stayed anywhere long enough. You know, he builds up Temple, and as soon as they win the AAC championship, he goes to Baylor. As soon as Baylor's in the conference championship, loses in double overtime to a top 10 Oklahoma team, they go play Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, boom, he goes to Carolina. He's never stayed anywhere long enough to see what can happen once he's built a program up. So we don't know. It's a question mark. So my question to you is, Penn State looking at that, like, if he stayed here long enough, you guys are already built up. Let's be honest. Okay. And even though you're 3-3 right now, you have the roster of a much better team, which is why there's being, you know, there was a coaching change made. Do they possibly view it as, he comes here, we've got it built up, he now can pick up where he's left off at other places and potentially, boom, that's what we're looking for? Or is it more, he hasn't done it yet and we want a little bit more certainty type deal?
I think fans want a little bit more certainty. I don't know what Pat Kraft's wiggle room is on that. Based on the way that Pat Kraft spoke earlier on this week, and the fact that he's willing to eat somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 million in terms of a buyout for James Franklin, tells me that he's not necessarily prepared to take a step backwards, and that the hope is to take the torch that was lit or reignited, I would say, by James Franklin all those years ago, and to move the ball forward, so to speak. So I think that's ultimately what is being asked. But as you well know, Adam, far better than I, having played at the college level, the National Football League, is that you come in with a new coach, inevitably you're going to make changes to the staff, to the program, et cetera. So you have 12 years of James Franklin's machine to potentially dismantle. Not that it's a bad program by any means. You're inheriting a healthy program, but you're inevitably going to want to make changes to that. So it depends if it is someone who you bring in and say, hey, you can do whatever you want. You can rip this thing to shreds and make it your own. Or it's like, hey, we would like you to get in a car and drive. And that's about it. So I think there's some concerns overall about Matt Rhule. And then realistically, man, Adam, he's doing a good job at Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
He's getting NIL commitment. Dylan Raiola didn't just go to Nebraska because his family has ties to the university. Let's not kid ourselves. It's not like Georgia didn't throw a lot of money at him, okay? So he's clearly getting a good commitment from Nebraska, and they are incrementally building year over year. And he's in one of the two power conferences. So it does beg the question, why would Rhule leave to jump theoretically from the third tier of the Big Ten to into the second tier of the Big Ten when he's already building something and he wouldn't have to go to State College to restructure a whole program?
So I'm on the record as saying I do think he's going to stay, and that's me trying to take my Nebraska hat off and just kind of evaluate things as much as I can, as unbiasedly as I possibly can. My wife pointed out something to me, though. She goes, did Penn State just inherit our curse? And that curse, we've got a lot of curses, Jake, as you know. All right, one of those curses is we would fire 9 and 10 win coaches. You know why? Because we've done it twice. And now you guys just did the same thing. We did it, and it didn't go so well. You look at Florida, you look at what they were doing with Dan Mullen, and they said that wasn't good enough, and now you look where they've been since. Is there any, which isn't where they want to be or even close, they went backwards. They took a step back to go forwards, except they kept going backwards, and they haven't been able to take steps forwards since then. Really, in all fairness, it hasn't been awful, but not what they wanted and not even where they were when they let go of Mullen. So my question to you, is there any concern in Penn State, like, hey, we got to win 11, 12 games. We got to find that guy, obviously willing to spend money. But is there any concern like, hey, this guy was winning 9, 10, even 11 games. You've going to last year every year. Is there any concern there may be you inherited our curse and go backwards at all?
Absolutely. I think the margin for error in this is razor thin because you're trying to go from that 90th percentile to the 99th. It's much more difficult to do than to get all the way back like James Franklin accomplished during his time. And he accomplished so much, and there was a lot of work that had to be done within the program. This was a football program that believed that people would just come here because of the logo. And that just hasn't been the case. That's not the modern era of college football, as Pat Kraft talked about. You have to have the infrastructure. You have to have the facilities. You have to have the education, the community. You have to have the opportunities to get to the National Football League, the money, all these things involved. So I think the answer is people are scared to death that Penn State is going to take a step back because, Adam, it was already realistic that looking at this roster, right, just from an X's and O's standpoint on the field, 2025, it looked like this was a team that could credibly contend for the national championship.
Mm-hmm.
That's out the window the last 2 weeks, right? The team that's been fielded, no freaking way is that going to happen. And it's mathematically impossible now. It was reasonable to look at this roster and expect a drop-off in 2026 based on talent because it's a veteran nucleus that is going to graduate, go to the NFL, or hell, the transfer portal. You have no idea. So now it's like, if we don't get the right guy, we're already taking a step down in terms of what we're putting on the field. How much further down could it go? I've talked about this for years, and you and I have discussed it. Beware the Bo Pelini effect. It is not easy to go from that level and then to get to a national championship. The Georgia circumstance, and we've had David Pollack on my show, State of State, a Penn State football show, to talk about this. David Pollack's like, I lived the Mark Richt experience. And then for us to go from Richt to Kirby Smart, that just doesn't happen to that many people. And you mentioned Dan Mullen. Dan Mullen's another perfect example. It's not easy to find the perfect guy. And if Pat Kraft doesn't nail this hire, he's going to be in the crosshairs. This is as big of a predicament as Penn State has faced in some time. Obviously not the worst it has faced by much, but you also have a fan base that is very accustomed to long tenured coaches, from Joe Paterno, who was there for decades. It just became commonplace at Penn State. This is the guy. This is the guy for a long time. So to get in a situation where Penn State, of all schools, is potentially bouncing around from coach to coach every 2-3 years, I don't know if a lot of Penn State fans want to envision that world.
It's funny you talk about the tenured coaches at Penn State. When I was coming out of high school, I remember the three most tenured coaching staffs in the country, and it was a different day and age of college football. Number one was Penn State. Number two was Nebraska, Solich and all the assistants at the time. And actually, number three was Mike Bellotti at Oregon randomly. They were the ones that pointed it out to me on my visit to Eugene. But my feelings are hurt that you just said the words Bo Pelini effect. That just hurt my feelings. I'm just going to put that out there.
Where's the lie?
I know. So Pete Nakos has said Matt Rhule's absolutely at or towards the top of this list of on three. I mean, Paul Feinbaum went on a scorching rant on Monday Sports Center. How much you want to pay attention to this? He said, and I quote, talking about Matt Rhule, he did everything but bed craft to hire him, end quote. So I don't know how much truth there is to that, but let's say it's not Matt Rhule. Okay, stay away from our coach. Let's say who are some of the other top candidates? And I'm just going to throw out the biggest names I can think of. Okay, and you tell me how far or close off I am. Nick Saban, if he wants to come out of retirement, Urban Meyer, John Gruden, Kurt Signetti. Am I even in the ballpark with any of these guys?
I mean, it becomes this conversation of like, who would you like to marry? Beyonce is available. Adele is available. It's like, yeah, sure. Like, those all sound great. Would we like the greatest coach of all time, Nick Saban? Absolutely. Would Urban Meyer have success? Yes. Now, is he a bit of a pariah when it comes to Big Ten football? Sure. So do Penn State fans accept making a deal with the devil to ultimately win a national championship? I think there's a lot of Penn State fans who would maybe say yes to that right now, and I think that would be polarizing. But I think Nick Saban is the one where you're like, yeah, across the board, everybody would say yes. The likelihood has got to be next to nothing. John Gruden is an interesting one because he's never going to work in the National Football League again. But there's no track record of him have any ability to work in this day and age of college football. So that, despite his star power and his past experience, and it's been a while, you don't know if that would work. So that's a big gamble in the grand scheme of things. Signetti, I would love. But coming back to the things I just said about Matt Rhule and the commitment he's gotten from Nebraska, look at the commitment that Signetti has gotten from Indiana. Why would he leave? He's already in the second tier of the Big Ten. So why make what is basically a lateral move to a brand that has more recognition and probably more resources? But he's called Indiana an emerging superpower. And Adam, he's not wrong. So why would you leave that? And he just gave him a boatload of money. He's had the same staff for a long time, all of his stops from D2 and on up. Why would he leave? That's my question with a lot of these. And you mentioned Pete Nakos before. He brought up Marcus Freeman. I'm like, why would Marcus Freeman leave Notre Dame?
Exactly. I'm with you on that. Yeah.
All of these candidates, great coaches, great ideas. They are ideas, whether they are real, plausible, and practical, and whether Pat Kraft has gotten a text message of somebody saying like, yep, legitimately interested, only Pat Kraft knows the answer to that.
Yeah, when I heard the Marcus Freeman thing, and they sure can make a run at him, with all due respect to both those schools, I don't see Penn State as a step up from Notre Dame. Notre Dame just played in the national championship. They beat Penn State to get there, and they are, Notre Dame as well. I love would you say, like the hot girl analogy? Because sometimes everyone wants the hottest girl out there or whatever, but sometimes it's not the right match. You got to have the right match for, if you were to marry her, the marriage to actually work.
Yes.
So let me ask you this question. What is and we're way early on. We're probably not going to know much more for quite a while. After games this weekend, this is all going to die down for a while until it reemerges, probably late November, December, or something like that. But at this moment in time, who would be your top 3 or 4 candidates as Penn State people view it for the Penn State head football coaching job?
I've seen Eli Drinkowitz's name out there from Mizzou. I think there's practicality to that because, again, he's gotten a good commitment from Mizzou in terms of NIL funding. They have a lot of money to play with, and they're making incremental progress within the SEC. He's willing to work in the transfer portal. He's getting better with recruiting. He's obviously having results on the field. But then again, it's like you're already in the SEC. And then there's this pipe dream that Penn State fans have of well, what if Trinkowitz comes to Penn State and he brings Bo Pribula with him and the prodigal son returns from York, Pennsylvania to Columbia, Missouri, back to State College? It would be something incredible. I have no idea if any of that is practical, but I like Drinkowitz because he has the qualities that Pat Kraft talked about earlier on this week: confidence and conviction, a toughness, a grittiness, and a desire to win. And I think putting it out there that the expectation is you come here to win a national championship, he doesn't strike me as a guy that backs away from that or is going to say like, oh yeah, sure. And then you come in and you just do what you have to do in the interim. Another name that's been thrown out there is Manny Diaz from Duke. He obviously has ties to Penn State. His path has been interesting in that he had the head coaching stint with Miami. That was, at the time, a dysfunctional athletic department and program. He gets fired. He goes to Penn State. He's a defensive coordinator, does very well, rehabilitates his image, takes the job at Duke. He's now rehabilitating his image as a head coach. I would be stunned if he was like, Duke's my last stop. You know, like this, in the grand scheme of things, you're trying to get somewhere bigger and there are bigger opportunities. So I think Manny Diaz could work. But then is it oil and water if it's a world where Manny Diaz and Jim Knowles are in the same staff? I don't quite know the answer to that. I've seen Matt Campbell thrown out there. I don't like that hire, not because I think he's a bad coach. I think he's a good coach, and he's done a lot with a little in the Big 12 out of Ames, Iowa, and they've consistently been good and sent guys to the National Football League. But another thing that Pat Kraft said earlier on this week is looking for a coach that will ignite the fan base. All due respect to Matt Campbell, nothing about him ignites a fan base. It's a safe hire, if anything, if you go get Matt Campbell. It's not an exciting hire. So, and that's the challenge of all this is, do you make a splash hire and you go get the big name and hope it works out? That's what UNC just did, and that's blown up in their faces.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's really tough because I think Penn State fans are in this situation where, again, this is polarizing. There are all these people calling for Franklin's head for years, and the second he gets fired, they're like, how can you fire him? He was winning 9 to 10 games a year. And there is no clear answer of who the next guy is. And then I think a small fraction of a percentage chance is that they promote from within. I think the existing interim head coach, Terry Smith, who is already the associate head coach, he is considered maybe the best position coach in the country, cornerbacks coach, consistently churns out NFL talent, and he's one of the best recruiters in the country. Would Pat Kraft want to continue the same philosophy and methodology that James Franklin put into place? I doubt that. But I think Terry Smith is going to do an outstanding job the next handful of weeks as the season finishes up, and I do hope he gets a fair shake at this.
Man, it seems like it's wide open right now. Lots of questions, not a lot of answers. When the answers do come around, we might have to bring you back on the show. I appreciate you taking the time, my man.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. Don't come for our players when the transfer portal opens, all right?
Oh, we're already coming for your recruits, dude.
Stay away. You keep your Patrick Mahomes lookalike and stay in Lincoln.
Oh, he just turned heel on him. I love it. All right, thanks for joining us, Tom.
Thanks, buddy.